to create that culture, that safe culture for us to take academic risks and whatnot. Okay. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead. So today, pause for a second, make sure you have a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen to write with. It is a little meta. We're going to be taking notes on how to take notes. So just make sure you've got your pen and paper there ready to go. So today we are going to be talking about the different ways to take notes. In addition, we're going to talk about what you should actually be writing down for your notes. If we have time, we'll talk a little bit about what goes into a discussion post, since we had our first discussion already. And this, we haven't been able to make it, but maybe with this group, we can make it to how to study. So the first thing I want to talk about is why it's important to even be going over how to take notes. And part of it is because it's not just about writing things down as you read them, but it's important to have some sort of organization or a system to write it in, right? That organization and that system is going to be the way that's going to set you up for accessing information and understanding it. And not only that, but what you write down is more important than how you structure your notes. The whole point of taking notes is so that you don't have to go back to the text and read the textbook all over again, right? So there was a study done at Stanford University, and this quote comes from this article. It says, "It's not merely about using a greater number of resources for studying. The important point here is using resources more effectively." And that's kind of what I want to focus today. So let's first go over all the different styles of note-taking. First thing I want to tell you is that I will not be collecting notes. So you really get to choose how you want to take notes. I'm not going to be grading them. I'm not going to see them. So I'm going to give you a couple of options, but you are not limited to what I have on the screen here. You are welcome to use whatever note style works for you. You can mix a couple together. It's really up to you. But some that we're going to talk about are Cornell notes, an outline. Bullet points we're not going to get too into. It's really just exactly what it sounds. You just create bullet points and just kind of keep it in order. There's something called mind mapping and visual note taking. Okay, so those are the four that I'm going to go over today. So let's go ahead and start with column notes. 2-column notes are also known as Cornell notes. This is the one that is going to align most with the study guide that Fuel Ed provides. So if you ever go to that last slide on the introduction where they have the link, it's a PDF, you download it, and then it has the heading of each slide on the page with some space to take notes. And so this method is going to be the way to do it. It's going to be the closest way to that method. So let's take a look. We have, let me get my cool arrow here. So we have right here on the left column, that's going to be like those slide titles, you know, how they have it separated in the PDF or the study guide. That's kind of what would go here as well. So this would be like that dark and bolded title at the start of each slide in Fuel Ed. And that would go over here in that left column. Okay. You're also going to put vocabulary words over here. So you would put vocab word here. And if there's a question that the book provides, or maybe you have a question that comes up while you're reading, then that question would be over here on the left side. On the right side is where you're going to be writing your notes, and you get to choose how you want to write it. So outline, you can choose bullet points, you can do drawings. You get to choose how you actually take the notes, but this is just the structure, right? So this is going to be your notes, right? And the main topics, the main ideas, your information. This is also where you're going to be writing down the definitions of vocabulary words. So remember that you put the vocab words over here, and then the definition is going to go on the right side. Also, if you wrote down any questions, your answers are going to be over here on the right side. Now, the thing about Cornell notes is that they also include this summary right here. So this summary is really just the main points, your takeaway concepts, for the notes on that same page. So when we say summary, we're not saying the summary of the entire lesson or the summary of the entire chapter. It's just the summary of the notes on that page. And what's important here is to write it in your own words. And we're going to get into why it's so important to write in your own words a little later. But one of the reasons that I can tell you now is because it will save you time for when you go back to looking at your notes, right? So when you're able to say it in your own words, that moves your ability to comprehend a little bit more than just reading, right? If you can understand what you read, that's great. But the question is really, do you understand it to a point where you can explain it to someone else? And that's the beauty of using your own words, is it kind of starts to fill in or show you where those gaps of understanding are so that you can better your conceptual processing of it. So that was Cornell notes. Our next type of notes is the outline. So in this outline notes, if you take a look at these two examples, you've got one that has different colored bullet points, right? Or you've got ones that has a big A, little a, and then an I. Now, the only thing that really matters in outline notes is your indentation. Outline notes are really great in terms of looking at big picture and then bringing it in to a small detail or small concept. So it goes from big picture down to the details. And so when you make the indentations, that's kind of organizing your notes, right? So the way that you label each line doesn't necessarily matter. You can choose what works for you. It's really about how far along from that left margin your notes are. So let's take a look at some examples, or an example. So if we go ahead and we zoom in here, you're going to see an example here of someone that wrote in. So what we have here is the title. So that would be like the lesson name. And then your heading here would be the title of your slide. That would be like what was in the study guide that separated it from slide to slide. So that would go up here. So as like compares to the last slide where the outline notes was with colored bullet points or big letters, this individual is doing it like a little bit of color coding and doing this kind of cloud outline to show that it's the heading, right? So the title of that slide. Underneath is going to be your first major point. And then underneath that, you're going to start to do the details of the point. Maybe you have a sub point or subtopic, and then you could go even more indented to create a detail about that subpoint. And then you can see that this individual is going to do it again. Now, here's an example. So if you take a look up here, they say that you're going to have the title that summarizes the entire topic. And that's exactly what this individual did here. They put down Federalist versus Republican. So we know that this set of notes is going to be talking about that. The first section of their reading was about George Washington as elected president. So already we know that we're looking at the first presidency and how that played a role in us going between the Federalists and Republicans. So we've got 1789. That's one of our subpoints, or our subpoints to the header, right? The main point. And this is another one, right? So now we're starting to get information about the cabinet. And his cabinet was made up of John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Alexander Hamilton, which, by the way, is a great musical if you haven't seen it yet. So now we know that we've got our key players. The next one, right? The next main topic is the issues that divided the team. So they went ahead and talked a little bit more about the first issues that divided them into the Federalists and the Republicans. And that detail was the Hamilton's debt program was one of the reasons. And then in here, the individual wrote down one of the reasons, right? So there was $75 million in debt. And then a subpoint was breaking down the debt into the different areas from foreign debt, state debt, and domestic debt. So that's an example of how you can use outline, right? So it kind of goes from big to specific. Are there any questions so far about, hi Kaya, thank you for joining us. Are there any questions about the outline so far or Cornell notes before I move on?
Can we take notes in a different way than the student guide on the actual like projects?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
The study guide is there just as an example, but if you have a different way that works for you, by all means, use what works for you. You know yourself the best as a learner. Any other questions? Okay. So we've gone through a couple, right? We've gone through, yes, Kaya, you should take some notes. This is, I know it's very meta. You're taking notes on taking notes. That these are going to just be some, what we're going through right now is just the different types and ways that you can take notes. And then we're going to move into what you should actually write down for your notes. So I would recommend that you write some stuff down. Okay. So if we move into the next one is mind mapping. And this is my personal favorite just because I'm such a visual learner that this kind of note-taking really starts to bring an overview. You can kind of see the overview of the lesson and how things connect. So it's similar like outline, right? That it goes from like big concept down to the details, but then they add in this interesting part, which is connecting with lines. So it starts off with the central idea. In the center is going to be the main idea. So maybe that is the lesson name, right? If you're talking about fuel ed and the way that you go through the slides. So the middle is going to be the lesson name. Then you'll have your subtopic, and that to me would be the title of each slide, right? Or maybe paraphrasing the title of each slide. Then you get to the supporting details, and that's going to be kind of your notes. And you can go even deeper into the details about the details. But the great part about this is that you can connect it with lines. In biology and science in particular, there are so many connections that you can make from one topic to another. And the mind mapping really allows you to draw in those lines to show how those connect. Mind mapping, you may have also heard it as a web or a concept map. All of those are pretty much the same thing. So let's take a look at some examples. I have a couple of examples here on the screen. Let's go to each corner. So I really like mind mapping, but I'm not super artistic. So this is kind of what mine look like. So this is probably the most simplistic way that you can do it. So you've got your central topic, you've got your main themes, and then you've got these little details coming off of that. And then you could even have details coming from there. Then you've got ones that kind of start to use color. And so this one is like a different type in the sense that they just use lines. They don't kind of do the circle, which is totally fine. But then they kind of branch it off. I kind of think of this as branches, everything is kind of goes from the center and branches out. And that's also another way that you can do it. You can use colors, you can use emphasis, right? You can capitalize anything that's going to make the information stand out. Now we start to get to ones that are a bit more creative. And like I said, this is all at your ability, your levels, your interests. So you definitely don't have to have it look like this. But this is just another example of how this individual took the idea of a concept map and really made it their own. So they had a concept map about their goals, and then they wrote something around it. So they are talking about how these are things that are meant to accomplish, right? Achieve or integrate, right? So then they break up their goals from work goals and personal goals. And the reason why I want to show you this one is because this is a great example of how they have something that relates to multiple topics, right? So enjoy everything. And so that's a goal that they have in general, but it's also one that they're applying to their personal goals and their work goals. If they want to enjoy that, they want to enjoy their work, they want to enjoy their personal life, right? So that's kind of one way to look at it as well. Then we can get really artsy, and you can kind of use different themes to make your concept map. So this person did a plant related to the points, and they are using leaves to kind of separate that out. So that's concept maps. Are there any questions on concept maps? If not, we can move on. So over here, we have visual note-taking, and this is for my students who really like to draw and maybe don't like to write as much. And so visual note-taking is a great opportunity if you like to doodle, if that is something that kind of captures your attention and you have more entertainment and more fun for that, then I would really recommend it. And there's a couple of things. I mean, you could Google this on your own, and there are so many documentations and articles that you can read that give you an idea of how to organize it or go about it, but I have just a few. So here, this is like a little guide. Are we taking notes in preparation for? Yes. So you should be taking notes on all of the lessons that you're doing, because it's also just a great way for you to process information, is writing it down too, or typing is fine. And so with this, right, we've got our font handwriting. So making sure that it is legible and clear. So whatever you're doing to write, you're really making sure that you can read your handwriting. It's really important. Using coloring or shading to emphasize information, using arrows to show the direction in which your thoughts are, right, and the direction of your information, using some sort of frame that's going to keep and contain information in a certain area so you know where to go for when you're looking for notes or looking through things to study. You're going to want to use your finger or mouse to follow the arrows. 5 is you're going to be thinking about pictures, and then 6 is that you're going to be drawing it. Now, this person went ahead and did this example, but then they also show you over here, they've used other sides of the page to put in more notes. So they have things like, when would you use this, right? So then you could use this anytime you're taking notes. Some tips and tricks that they include are to listen to the information, then synchronize it or kind of condense it to the most important parts, and then visualize it and think about what that looks like to you, and then put it in drawings. And you will need to create and include some words, just because you do need some of that vocabulary. You do need some sort of phrases to kind of give you that detail and explanation that a drawing just can't encapsulate in one. So here are a couple of examples. So this is very meta, visual note taking on how to take visual notes, right? So if we start, so we have a couple of things that we saw from the last one too, right? We have numbers, we've got arrows, we've got colors, and they use their handwriting as a way to really emphasize information. And so here, what they are saying is to listen to the content. So for example, they say photosynthesis is the process in which autotrophs convert light energy from the sun into, and then, so they're telling you that's the information, right? That's the notes that they're listening to or reading. The next step is to then filter for core messages and critical concepts. And then they have a picture. They actually did a picture that is a strainer, and they are showing you that whatever's falling through is the filter excess filler, and then what's left over is the core message, right? So they're using a visual to express how you need to filter for the core information for critical concepts. Then the next step is translating that content and picturing it. So basically what they want you to do is kind of think about what it is the concepts, picture it in your mind, and then record it on paper. So translating and content into visual language. So over here they have autotroph. So they're taking a vocabulary word and they're drawing an autotroph, which an autotroph is just an organism that makes their own food. So plants are often what we use as an example. And light energy from the sun. So now they're kind of giving you some sort of, visual cue for light energy, right? Then you record what you hear and understand, and then you are going to constantly come back to your drawings, revisiting it, making sure that you have everything that you need and that you feel good about it. Okay, constantly adding information, constantly adding in colors. Over here is just another way of thinking about it and what to include, and that would be things like connectors, right? So this individual is using different visual cues to represent connections. So a strong connection is really bolded, weak is dotted line, right? They talk about a disconnect that's broken, multiple directions. So they're using arrows to explain a relationship between two things. Containers, they kind of give these kind of signals, these little drawings that are giving you an example of how they kind of specify information and what kinds of information it is. They use color to represent key points or highlight key accents, and then like maybe to do vocab words, right? And then common objects, things that you would use over and over to symbolize something. And that is visual note taking. Do you have any questions on visual note taking? Okay. So now we've had a chance to take a look at all the different styles. There are so many more than just that. So please do not feel like you need to be limited to just the few that I've gone over. But now is time for the juicy stuff, the meat and potatoes, if you will, right? So what do you actually have to write down? I've got my way of taking notes. I don't, I'm going to try this way. I'm going to stick to my old ways, but I really just need to know what to write down. So let's take a look. And I really want you guys to make sure that you're including this in your notes. So when you're looking at information, it's really important to be looking out for these 6 things and including them in what you're writing down. And those are key sentences, right? So key sentences usually happen within the first 2 sentences of a paragraph, of a section. It's kind of setting the stage for what the rest of the information is going to be about. They're usually within the first 2, and I say that because sometimes that first sentence is actually an introduction or a transition sentence. So there's often times where they're just kind of segueing, they're kind of setting the scene, and then the sentence that follows is often going to be the main point. That's kind of be like they've got you in, they've got your attention, and now they're going to present you with the concept that's important. And that's what you want to be writing down in one of your notes, is the key points. Once you read through the paragraph and they're talking about the concept, you're writing down important information about the concept. They also include examples. Textbooks really like, and slides really like to provide multiple examples about the concept that they're talking about, right? And that's to put it to real life. It's applying to something that is using that concept. But for you, you really only need to be writing down one of those examples, and the example that makes the sense the most. Okay, because they're providing multiple examples, but mostly to just kind of prove a point or to try to reach multiple learners in their interest. And so you just need to choose one of those. If you understand the concept and you're like, I don't really need to write down an example, then don't. The example is only there to help you understand the key process, concept, whatever information they're giving you. Okay. Let's go back to the in your own words part. So I mentioned this earlier, but writing your notes in your own words is incredibly important. Earlier, I talked about how being able to express something in your own way really highlights gaps of misunderstanding. So you may read something and it may register with you, but then sometimes if you go and try to talk to someone else about it, you're like, oh, but I got it, but I don't. How did that go again? That usually means that there is some sort of gap in understanding. And so when you write things in your own words, I can identify what parts of it you don't understand and then go back to the reading or go to a different source and solve that. But writing things in your own words is similar to talking and explaining things to somebody else. It really just gives you a time to think about your thinking, a lot of metacognition, reading that first thing that you read and then trying to understand it and process that information, right? And that's really a big part of moving your learning from just like reading and then comprehending, right? Those are 2 different things. The second thing about writing things in your own words, if you were to copy it down from the slide, from a textbook, if you were to write it word for word in your notes, right? And it's time for a quiz or test to come up, you're going to sit down, you're going to study. You're basically rereading the textbook. And so that's fine. That's totally okay if you want to do that. But by writing it in your own words, you save time and an extra step, because when you read that information from the text or from the slide, you need to read it in their words, you need to process it, and then your brain already kind of starts to put it into a way that you understand. So if you already do that when you're writing your notes down, you skip that step when you go back and you're already looking at notes and reading them in a way that you already understand. You don't have to do that processing part of like, okay, photosynthesis is the chemical reaction that happens when the plant absorbs sunlight, it takes in carbon dioxide and takes in water, right? So if you write that in your own words, you're going to have a chance to go through it quickly and understand it quickly. The next part is definitions. So whenever you see a vocabulary word or definition, you should write it down. So vocabulary words are going to pop up throughout the Fuel Ed course, and in Fuel Ed, it's a bigger text, it's blue, and it's underlined, and it's hyperlinked. with the definition. In other places, in textbooks, it may be highlighted, maybe bolded, italicized, but whenever there's a vocabulary word, you really want to write that down. In addition, moving swiftly into the bolded area, right? Whenever there is information or a text that stands out from the rest of the paragraph, it probably means that that information is important. So anytime something is highlighted or italicized or bolded, something that stands out from the rest of the paragraph, make sure you write that down and in your own words as well. The last thing that you want to make sure is that you are doing anytime there are linking words or anytime that they share that there is a relationship between two concepts, whether it's within the same chapter, whether it's past, or whether it's alluding to something in the future. You really want to be paying attention to any time that there is a concept that's going to be causing effect to another, whether it's a causal relationship, right? There's going to be a bunch of different things that concepts relate. And that's one of the reasons why I really love the concept map, because that's when the arrows come into play. They really give you an opportunity to connect how things are related to one another in multiple aspects. Okay, so that was a lot. So now I want to give you guys a chance. So I am going to go ahead and give everyone access to writing on the whiteboard. And so what I would like for everyone to do is take a look at the slide that's in front of you. Okay, just take a second to read through it. I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds to read those 3 paragraphs. Okay. Now that you've had a chance to kind of read through the 3 paragraphs, do I have a volunteer who would like to write on the whiteboard? Looks like we already have some writing going on. But do I have a volunteer with anyone who would like to write on here and kind of use the different colors in your toolkit to and talk us through what you would write down for your notes? Anyone? Okay. Thank you, Colin. Go ahead.
Okay. So I would probably first I'd look at the first couple of. Can you guys see where my mouse is, or do I?
If you click on like the mouse with the star,
This.
yeah, you
Okay.
got it.
So I would look at these first 2 sentences and just matter exists in many different forms. That seems like it relates to what the heading is. So I feel like that would be something that would be important to write in the notes. I would probably do. Hold on. All right, you guys get xylophone in the background. So I would say. So I would probably do the outline style. So this would be my one of my heading sentences, and then I just skim through this paragraph. I'd write down. I would write down element because that's an underlined word. And I don't know. I'd probably look through this last sentence and also write that down.
Good. So also paying attention that you're writing down the vocabulary word and you're defining it, right? Great. Okay, what do you want to go ahead and finish the slide, or would you like me to call on someone else?
Someone else can do it.
Okay. All right. Do I have another volunteer that would like to finish this slide? Ashton, go ahead.
Oh, do you want me to do the drawing part of it?
Whatever you're comfortable with. Yeah, if you want to use your cursor, if you want to use the pencil and underline it, whatever you'd like.
All right. I figure because this is underlined, it's one of the main.
Uh-oh, I think I lost you.
I got muted or something.
Yeah. Are you there, Ashton? Now you're unmuted. Ashton? Uh-oh. Technology. Oh. Christian, why don't you go ahead? Ashton, while you're figuring out the camera. Go ahead, Christian. Mm-hmm. What's that? Yeah. Can you do those for us, please? Can you show us what you would like go through those last two paragraphs and tell us what you would write down for your notes?
Probably write down fundamental kinds of matter. I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, so.
Okay, no problem. Why don't I go ahead and kind of finish this slide, and that way we can move on to the next one and take a look at another example. So so Colin earlier was talking about what he would underline, right? So this would be the title of your slide. So this would be kind of like what you would put in one of the bubbles in the mind map, the first one off of the contents. And then like if you're in an outline, you would put it on the left. You'd be putting it as one of the headers, or Cornell notes, you'd put this on the left side of the column. So like Colin said, he says that matter exists in many different forms. I would actually say that's more of an introduction sentence. So absolutely no problem if you do write it down. But I would say that it's more important, let me change colors here. This sentence that follows is really what's going to get to the heart of what they want you to know. So one of the most fundamental kinds of matter is an element, right? And then just like Colin said, element is a vocabulary word because it's underlined and blue, and there's a hyperlink there. So you would want to write down element right underneath that first sentence and define it. An element is, as you will soon see, you don't need to write that because that's just alluding to the future. Substance is that made only of one kind of atom, right? So that's something that I would write down. Now, in this next section, it says you may be familiar with some elements such as silver, copper, and carbon. This word, such as, is the same thing as saying, for example. So like I said, you'd only want to write down one example. So maybe I would write down silver because that's the one that I know the most. Great. And Kaya shared, she said, I'd write this. Elements equals substances only made of one atom. Great. Elements include silver, copper. Great. Elements are unique in their properties, ways they interact. Amazing. Kaya, you nailed it. That's exactly what I was going to go into. So yes, element has its own characteristics and properties, and that that tells you how it's going to interact. Exactly. Good job, you guys. I'm really impressed. All right, we have two more examples, actually. So Ashton, did you want to, is it working again? Are you good? You want to try this?
I could try.
Yeah, let's go for it. It seems like your microphone's being a little wonky, huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening.
Oh man, I just heard you. Ashton, why don't you try logging out and logging back in real quick, okay?
You could also try if you're on Windows, because I know you can switch between them sometime. You could go to Mac and see if that would fix it.
Thanks for the feedback, for the help. Kaya, do you want to try this one real quick? And then Christian, I'm going to have you do the next one, okay? So as you can see, what we're doing is we are trying to figure out what we would be writing down for our notes, right? I just gave you guys some pointers in terms of what you should write down. So we're just kind of practicing. So it's really low risk, no big deal. We're learning together. So I just would love for you to give it a try on the next slide, okay? So let's let Kaya go ahead and try, and then you can give it a try on the next one. That's okay, Kaya. Why don't you go ahead and type it, and then like kind of what you just did in the earlier chat where you just typed what you would write, and I'll read it out loud to everyone. So we're just kind of waiting for Kaya to respond, which is totally fine. Everyone else should be taking a look though and thinking about what they would do. So if you're just kind of looking at it and reading through it, think about what you would write down, and you can see maybe Kaya picked up something that you didn't get, and vice versa. You know, Christian, that I really appreciate you sharing your honesty. I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing it. The not so great, the great thing is that that's exactly what we are going over right now. So as Kaya is kind of typing up her response, Kaya, I apologize. I'm going to go back just a little bit. I want to show Christian something. So if you haven't already, Christian, I really would like for you to write these 6 things down, because that is what you like. That's going to answer your question, right? You're saying you're not sure what to take notes on. Well, this is it, right? This is how you're going to take notes. And if you're confused on what to take notes on about taking notes on, it's this right here. Okay, so make sure you're writing this down, because this is going to help you a lot. When you're reading through those lessons and you're like, there's so much information. How do I need to write all of this down? Coming back to these 6 things is going to always give you a good indication as to what you should be looking for. Okay, so if you haven't, maybe if you have a phone nearby, or if you have a screen, like you can take screenshots, take a picture of this, okay? Because I'm going to go back, since Kaya was going to give us her answers and what she would take notes on. So I have to go back to the other slide. So Christian, let me know when you've got a picture of this or if you've got it written down, okay? Got a picture? Awesome. All right, Kaya, how are you doing? You ready? Ashton, are you there? It looks like you're still connecting. Awesome. Okay. So Kaya said elements are organized, described in the periodic table. Great. So right away we can see that. So let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit more. Right away we can see that this is italicized, right? That's one of the things I told you about. Whenever there's italicized, you want to make sure it's standing out, important information. So Kaya said elements are organized, described in the periodic table. 4 elements make up over 96% of all living things. Great. That's the first sentence, and it's really important. And Kaya went ahead and told me all 4 of those, right? And then she put in parentheses, especially carbon. And in your notes, when you're writing this down, you could even just star carbon, yeah? Or you could underline it a lot to kind of give it that emphasis that carbon is really, really important. And then she also included that letter symbols for each element represent 1 atom of the element. And then she puts in 1 of the examples. Great. So that is absolutely great. That is 100% what I was looking for. You know, I think that those are really great points that you picked out. You gave 1 example. You shortened things like carbon equals C instead of writing it out. Like you didn't write out a single carbon of atom is represented by the letter C, right? You used your own system, your own symbols to kind of explain that. So you did a great job, Kaya. All right, Christian, no worries. If you're not ready to do it, not a problem, but I'm also here if you kind of want to try, okay? You let me know, Christian, if you want to give it a try. Perfect, Christian. So why don't you go ahead and, oh, okay, good, Ashton. I'm glad that you're with us. Christian, why don't you go ahead and take off? Oh, you already did. Great. Share with us. What did you want to share? Oh, I understand. You wrote down the other slide. Okay, Christian, go ahead and try this guy. Go, what would you record? What information would you write down for this?
I'm muted.
We can hear you now.
Okay, so I would write down protons have a positive electrical charge,
Great. What else?
and that Neutrons have neither a positive nor a negative electrical charge.
Good. And
And let me. Small particles called electrons. Electrons have a negative electrical charge.
exactly. Good. So you clearly hit all of the vocab words, which is amazing. Great job. Is there anything else that you would write down?
Not
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and highlight just a few other things that I would recommend you that you would write down as well. So if you take a look, we said, right, that atoms are made up of three kinds of particles: protons, neutrons, and electrons. Okay, so, and then at the center of every atom is a nucleus. So this is our introductory sentence. We can write that down. That's going to set the stage, right? And then you do want to know that there is a nucleus in the center of every atom, because that's going to kind of give you the structure of an atom. So that is important. You did a great job, Christian, of getting all the definitions. High five. I loved it. But don't forget that it also said that it makes part of the nucleus. So now what they're also giving you information about protons and neutrons being in the nucleus is the location of it, right? They're giving you a structure of the atom and then telling you where you can find each of these atoms, or excuse me, subparticles. And then the last thing is they talk about the moving at nearly the speed of light around the nucleus are small particles called electrons. Really what you need out of that sentence is that you just need to know that electrons are around the nucleus. It's really cool if you know the speed of light. That will help you later on when you take chemistry. But for this course, you really just need to know the location of the electrons. But that's really what I would focus on this page. And you guys did all such a great job of being able to pick out that information. So thank you for volunteering, and thank you for speaking out or speaking up. I really appreciate the participation. So that's what I have for you about note-taking. So hopefully that's helped you, and hopefully that's going to give you a better chance and understanding of when you go into your next few lessons, like how to filter out what you need to write down so that you can be more effective in your notes and it doesn't take as long, right? I have you guys for about 3 more minutes, or well, technically it's over, but I'd really like to go ahead and discuss this if you guys can stick around. So the next couple of minutes is going to be about a discussion post. When I started to grade discussions, and it was very clear to me that there has been, I haven't been very clear in what goes in a discussion post. And so I wanted to take some time so that we can make sure that we are doing our discussion post in a way that's is meaningful for you and for me. So let's take a look at the rubric really quickly. Let me do my screen share. And this is what I'm going to be using to grade you guys on your rubrics. And so I'm really just going to focus on this one column for sake of time, and this is going to be where you can get the most amount of points. So I really just want to highlight that column. But you're going to be graded in about 4 categories. The first one is your initial response to prompts. So forget about this first deadline. I need to delete that because you don't get marked down for being late, right? So that's no problem. But my first thing is, did you do it? Did you respond to the prompt? And then not only did you respond to the prompt, but did you do it well? Did you do it with clear effort? And did you include details, right? So remember that the idea of a discussion post is to take place of a conversation that you would have in class. So the discussion post is a way to kind of get your ideas, pose questions, get a comment going that's going to elicit a response or get your peers to respond to you. And it's also a reflection on the information that we've learned. So if you have a post, a discussion assignment in chapter 2, it's going to want you to bring in some information that you've learned about that so far. So making sure that that's what we mean by clear effort and details. The other part of a discussion post is to respond to 3 postings or 3 peer postings. So when you are done with yours, you're going to take a look at what your other classmates have said and kind of give a response to what they may have mentioned. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. We want to make sure that the content, like I was saying before, that the content is high quality and that it reflects a good conceptual understanding and completion of assigned coursework, right? And that's really important because the whole point of the discussion post is not only to bring your own ideas, but to also use the information. The question is going to be about the lesson that we just completed. So making sure that you're incorporating that is going to be really important. The last category is quality of your post and the quality of your response to the other posts. So in general, the appropriate length is going to be somewhere between 30 to 75 words of well-written text. That does not mean the ands and thes and is, and it's not just trying to put in as much fluff as possible. We're talking about content straight directly to the point. We're looking for about a 30 to 75 word response. And not only that, but you want to make sure that you're added significantly to the discussion. And you can do that by suggesting other solutions, providing or pointing out problems, respectfully disagreeing. And then anything that you say, it's substantiated or supported with any comments or reasoning or source citation. So this is really when we get into that evidence-based reasoning, right? Making sure that whatever statement you're about to make is backed by science, backed by evidence, right? So you're not just kind of pulling things out of thin air and throwing it out there and being like, this is a statement. You really need to back it up with science. And then that goes back to the quality of responding to your peers. You know, really think about this as a conversation. If you were to respond to a post and say, good work, that really doesn't further a conversation, right? You can respond to a peer's post by saying, I really liked what you said. You brought up a really good point. I never thought about it this way. You can disagree with someone respectfully by saying, I respectfully disagree because, and then listing out your reasons, right? Or you can bring up and maybe something somebody posted made you think of a question. Be like, wow, your post really made me think about this. And now I'm wondering this, right? These are all great examples of how you can respond to a post. For just the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to show you kinds of what that looks like in the sense of like the order, right? So when you get the assignment of your discussion, you get to it, right? You're going to go ahead, you're going to respond. And once you post your response, you're going to take a look around and see if anybody else has also had a chance to respond. And then you're going to comment, and you're going to do that for 3 people. Right? So you got your discussion assignment, you reply to 3 other posts, but what happens if you're one of the first students to get to that assignment? Right? What if you're the first to respond and you post yours and you're looking around to see what your peers have said and you realize nobody else has said anything? Do you think that means that you're done? No, that just means that you were the first one, and that's great. So then what you'll need to do is you'll need to come back. You'll need to come back in a couple of days and see if other responses have been posted. And then once you realize they do, make sure that you respond to those 3 other posts. Once you do that, you're done. So that was really what I wanted to go through today. Usually it's not going to be so much me talking. It's going to be way more you guys interacting with one another. But because of the nature of the way that the course is set up, I just felt like it was really important to kind of tell you guys some more in details about taking notes and how to take notes and whatnot. But that's everything I got for you. So, you know, if you have questions, I'll be around for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, you know, you're all set and you can head out and enjoy the rest of your day.